Good day, everyone. Good day, sir. We are Group 3 from BSCPE 2C. I am Alexa Feby F. Quirol, together with my co-reporter, Bernadette Mabel Paquino. And today, we will be discussing energy conversion through heat engines and Stirling engines. From the past discussions, we all know that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can change from one form to another. Here, heat engines are one of the best examples of this principle, as they convert heat energy into mechanical work. In this report, we'll explore how they work. Let's go! What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear heat engines? Maybe cars, motorcycles, or even power plants. In this report, we will briefly look at how they work, their types, and some of their advantages and disadvantages. So, what is a heat engine? Heat engines are machines that convert heat energy into mechanical work, and they can be found around us in our daily lives, such as cars, lawn mowers, and refrigeration cycles, in refrigerators and air conditioners. A heat engine is a system that works in cycles, meaning it repeatedly goes through a series of processes and then returns to its original state. During this cycle, the only interactions the system has with its surroundings are through the transfer of heat and the performance of work. Its main purpose is to convert heat energy, often taken from a high temperature source, into useful work, such as mechanical energy that can drive machinery or produce electricity. For example, in a power plant, components such as the boiler, turbine, and condenser and pump all play important roles in the process of generating power. However, when looked at separately, these devices do not qualify as heat engines because none of them on their own completes the full cycle needed for heat to work conversion. A boiler may supply heat, a turbine may convert energy into work, a condenser may remove heat, and a pump may maintain the flow of the working fluid, but only when all these components operate together in a repeating sequence do they form a complete cycle. It is this complete closed cycle that makes the whole system a true heat engine. To keep it simple, a heat engine is not just a single device, but a cyclic process where heat energy is transformed into work by the coordinated operation of several components working as one system. The mechanism of a heat engine. How exactly do they function? Let's break down the mechanism in a clear and systematic way. So, as I already stated, a heat engine operates in cycles, meaning it goes through a series of processes and then returns to its original state, ready to repeat again. Where does it begin? The process begins when the engine takes heat from a high temperature source. This heat energy is what drives the cycle. After doing its work, the engine releases part of this energy to a low temperature sink, ensuring the process can continue. Now, here's the core function. Part of the absorbed heat is converted into useful work or mechanical energy. This could be the motion of a piston in a car or the spinning of a turbine in a power plant. But not all heat can be transformed. The remaining energy is released as waste heat. According to the second law of thermodynamics, this waste heat is unavoidable because no heat engine can ever be 100% efficient. Some part of energy must always flow to the low temperature sink, which is why efficiency is always less than perfect. This principle explains why real engines no matter how advanced, always lose some energy to the environment. Finally, the cycle repeats. It continues as long as heat is supplied and excess heat can be discharged. This repeating cycle is what keeps engines operating and powering machines around us. In summary, a heat engine works by taking heat from a high temperature source, converting part into useful work, and inevitably releasing the rest as waste heat to a low temperature sink, as dictated by the second law of thermodynamics. This simple but powerful cycle is the foundation of many technologies we use every day. Every heat engine, no matter what type it is, requires three essential components in order to operate in a cycle. What are these three components? The first is the source, or hot reservoir. This is a body at a higher temperature that provides the necessary heat energy to start the process. Without this high temperature source, there would be no energy available for the engine to convert into work. The second component is the working substance. This is usually a gas or liquid inside the engine that actually carries out the process. The working substance absorbs heat from the source, expands, and performs mechanical work, like moving a piston or turning a turbine. After doing work, it also rejects some of the heat, preparing itself for the next cycle. Finally, we have the sink or cold reservoir. This is a body at a lower temperature that absorbs the waste heat released by the working substance. The presence of a cold reservoir is just as important as the hot one, because without it, the working substance would not be able to release heat and complete the cycle. So, a heat engine works through a continuous cycle of receiving heat from the hot reservoir, converting part of it into useful work with the help of a working substance, and then rejecting the remaining heat into the cold reservoir. These three components, such as source, working substance, and sink, are the foundation that allows all the heat engines to function. Now, let's talk about the types of heat engines. The first one is the internal combustion engine, or IC engine. In this type, the burning of fuel, commonly known as combustion, actually happens inside the system. You've probably seen or even ridden vehicles powered by IC engines, like cars and motorcycles. These engines use fuels such as petrol or diesel as their heat energy source. The basic principle is simple. When the fuel burns, it creates a high pressure environment. That pressure is then used to move a piston or spin a turbine, converting the heat energy into mechanical energy that we can use. The second type is the external combustion engine, or EC engine. As the name suggests, here the combustion happens outside the system, instead of the fuel burning directly inside. The heat from the combustion is transferred to another working fluid, often a liquid or a gas, which then acts as the fuel for the engine. For example, in a closed-cycle gas turbine, the heat from an external furnace is transferred to a gas, usually air, which then becomes the working fluid of the cycle. This is also the fundamental process behind steam power plants. In these systems, the heat energy from fuel is carefully converted step by step into mechanical work, and eventually into electricity. What makes it powerful is that the process is methodical and repeats continuously, which ensures a steady and reliable power output. So, to sum it up, internal combustion engines burn fuel inside the system, while external combustion engines burn fuel outside the system. And both play huge roles in how we convert heat energy into useful mechanical work. Now, let's compare the advantages and disadvantages of internal combustion engines and external combustion engines. Starting with the internal combustion engine or IC engine. So what makes IC engines useful? Well, they're cheaper to build, have a simple design, and are easy to start even in cold weather. On top of that, they produce a lot of power for the amount of fuel used, and energy losses are very minimal. But there are also downsides. These engines can't use solid fuels like coal, and they require a high level of maintenance, which can be costly over time. On the other hand, we have the external combustion engine or EC engine. What are the advantages? EC engines can run on almost any kind of fuel. They're more economical in certain uses and they produce very little emissions. In fact, they can even be used effectively at high altitudes where air is thinner. However, they're not perfect either. They take up more space, also require a lot of maintenance, and they operate at very high temperatures, which can be a challenge for efficiency and safety. In short, internal combustion engines are compact, powerful, and efficient for vehicles like cars and motorcycles, where external combustion engines are versatile with fuels and great for large-scale applications like power plants. But they need more space and careful maintenance. Each type has its strengths and weaknesses depending on where and how they're used.